right, thank you everyone, and for joining us, and welcome again here to Whisper Business Talk. I am your host Dario Mackins, and joining me as always is my co-host Amanda Grass.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing great. And yourself?
Good. Yeah, it's Friday.
Yes, it is Friday. Today is actually Friday the 16th. It's 10:30 a.m. So kind of early in the morning for us to be having this show, but for those of you who may be joining us, as always, feel free to comment below. We'll try to take and answer any questions that we have. You can also email us any questions, and we'll make sure to try to answer those as we go along. Today's topic of discussion here at Whisper Business Talk, we're going to be talking about employee reviews. So it's always fun thing coming in as a new employee, having that 60 or 90-day review or that yearly review for a lot of businesses as well. So we're going to be talking about employee reviews today. So again, feel free to comment and ask us any questions. We'll try to answer those as best as possible. So we're going to go ahead and get started then. Amanda, if we could just talk about an employee review and kind of give us that definition.
Sure. So the way we look at reviews here is essentially structured time set aside to discuss employees' performance. In terms of like why we in general, perhaps not just hopefully specific to Whisper, but in general, the importance of employee reviews. Everybody really likes to know how they're doing in their roles. I am a firm believer that as real time as possible, feedback is very, very important for growth and for if there are things that need to be smoothed out or kind of worked on, that feedback is best given as soon as possible. But having some structured time to really kind of run through, especially what people's goals are, that's ideal as well. Some of the bigger maybe changes or more like progressive action that we've seen with reviews, especially recently, is essentially just like opening up those lines of communication, perhaps moving away from a super structured format and only talking about these things and sticking strictly to a really firm rating system that maybe there's more conversation taking place. And we firmly believe that here that really that relationship between the manager and the employee is extremely important. And employee reviews and those conversations are really where a lot of that is like fostered and where you're able to build upon any rapport you've already established. Our thought process with this is like reviews shouldn't be the only time people are communicating with each other in that kind of a setting. We're firm believers here of having like one-on-ones that occur more frequently than perhaps what that review period looks like. But essentially like that open line of communication is a really huge piece of an employee's engagement in their role with a company and really getting their buy-in for essentially like doing very well and growing here and knowing that someone else is invested in their growth also. I think some good information that comes from reviews, obviously, how companies handle like their raises and structure for that is totally different from company to company. Here at Whisper, like we don't necessarily tie a review, like your review has been completed and therefore you receive a raise because of that action being complete. But I think it's really important to remember that you can get a lot of good information, especially if you're tracking that over time. That helps you kind of like make a case for why somebody deserves the raise that they do, or what kind of improvements you'd like to see before you can perhaps issue the raise that you or they would like to see for them. So there's a lot of good information and relationship building that can come from the review process.
Yep, and those are all great points. And that was going to be like pretty much the first question was going to be, what is the importance and why we here at Whisper, why do we have those employee reviews? So I don't know. Nope. Excellent job. I mean, you did answer the question. My first question that I was going to have, one question that has came through that I'm kind of looking at here says, what is the process like here at Whisper? And what are some of the things that we do and why?
Yeah. So maybe this kind of helps support even that original question that I just hopped right over. But we look at employee reviews as our responsibility to the employee. I mean, obviously, they have their own roles and responsibilities, but ensuring that they happen and ensuring that they are productive and useful and effective use of time is really what our focus is from an HR standpoint, and making sure that our managers believe that and essentially push that through because they're the ones who are holding the employee reviews. And so it's important for everybody to be on that same page that this is a prime opportunity for like a positive coaching. with your employees. Goal setting. We're huge believers here in growth, and growth looks differently depending on who you're talking to. Some of that may be like, I want to promote up into a manager level position, or it could just be really like, I really love the role that I'm in, but I want to take on more responsibilities or refine my skills to a much higher degree. So growth looks different for everyone, but those employee reviews are a great time to be able to set tangible goals and follow up and make sure that they're being met. Another big thing that's like essentially our responsibility with reviews is kind of like ensuring that that person is perhaps still a fit for the role that they're in and still actually in the role that they're in. A lot of times I think that we just kind of like get into this place of we take on what has to be done. And then if you truly look at what your position description may be, you might find that you spend a lot more of your time doing things that are not listed as your primary responsibilities. So is that a shift? Is that like hey, it's a shift for this employee to move into that role? Or is it we've tacked too much on, and to get this person back into the piece that they really loved, we need to revise that or review that kind of. At Whisper specifically, we've had quite a few changes recently. And when I say recently, I mean like within the last year or so. Previously, we had been on like an annual structure for employees. Now, new hires have a little bit different path for employee reviews, but all of our employees were going through an annual review process. And we actually moved away to that and made them more frequent. We actually review now on a quarterly schedule. And the purpose for that is like, there is a real thing of recency effect. If somebody had like a rock solid, stellar couple of months right before what their review period looks like, they're probably going to have a really great review. The opposite can be true as well, that if they've had a rocky couple of months, anything that may have been amazing prior to that can be kind of lost in whatever that historical plane looks like. So kind of having like the consideration of the full review period, which for us meant tightening that up and making it a little bit closer together. We also moved away from a very structured numerical rating system.
Yes.
What we had previously, I'm sure you remember these, the form went out. Yeah, the form went out in advance and people were supposed to fill them out prior to the meeting. What we think was probably happening is like the morning of the meeting, a lot of times they were getting done right before, but it was like that standard 1 to 5, provide some examples why, and the manager does this and the employee does this as well, and then we sit. And there was HR representation in that meeting, serving as essentially the person, I don't want to say mediating because that sounds bad, but like leading the meeting in that regard. And there was not a lot of conversation. It was basically like reading from a sheet of paper and everybody like, yep. So it just really didn't seem like effective use of time. As an employee in that, I don't know how you felt about that, but that was at least our thought processing behind that.
Yep. So seeing both sides of, and just to kind of explain more so of what that older review process was both the employee and the manager would receive that numerical rating system, right? So the employee would have to go through and rank themselves how well they thought they were performing 1 through 5, with 5 being the best. And then the manager would also rank them. So just sitting in on some of those from the employee side and both the manager side, it was all fine if you and the employee kind of had that same number, right? Well, I ranked you a 4 and you ranked yourself a 4. That's
Everyone's
great.
Like, yeah, cool.
Sweet. Let's move on to the next one. And then you would get to one where the person ranked themselves a 5, the employee did, and you, the manager, ranked them as a 2. So it's like, nope, let's have some discussion around that. And it was always pretty awkward in those types of scenarios and situations. But moving to our new format, which is, what we're doing now, where we have like the peer review, I think those are absolutely kind of phenomenal, and they serve a better purpose than the style we had before. If you could talk and maybe explain to maybe our listeners how our peer review looks like.
Sure. So one of the changes, at least with like new hires, when we have a new employee come into the company, we set them up on a 30-day, 60-day, and 90-day review period. We consider somebody's first 90 days with us their initial training period. We don't call this probationary period because they're not in jail. Like, we're not asking them to break out of something. This is the time for them to like train up and really refine their skill set while they're with us, so that they're super prepared for their role. At 30 days in, this is just the employee and just the manager. And what we're really looking at here is skill development, because by 30 days, you've been exposed to a lot of that like routine day-to-day stuff. Your first week or two may have been spent more classroom style, right? You go through orientation, you do some of that computer-based training. You're running through things in maybe a more controlled environment with a trainer. But then after that, you're going out into the wild and you're seeing things as they actually exist within your department. And we do have something called an OJT form, an on-the-job training form. And that is essentially like that person's checklist, right? That what they are trying to do is complete that. Not trying, that's what they are tasked to do. And their trainer is tasked to do in that training period is ensure that everything that's listed on here is essentially tying back to your position description of what your key responsibilities are. It's just the tasks in that format. And we want to be able to show them to you, to see you do them, and for you to get comfortable and efficient at doing so. And so by 30 days in, you've tackled some of those things that are on that OJT form. And you've seen kind of some of the stuff that exists on a department level as it comes up in the wild, and maybe some things that are like, whoa, I didn't really expect that or know how to handle that. But that lets us kind of see, like, how are you adapting to this position? Are you understanding? Do we see anything that maybe there is like a little red flag right off the beginning? Hopefully not. We hope not, obviously. But it helps set the stage for what somebody has been able to accomplish within those first few hectic weeks, and then really where things are going over the next 60 days as we continue down their training timeline. When you mentioned the peer panel, that actually is a 60-day review point for our new employees. And I always feel like in orientation, I have to tell people, like, caution, caveat, this is not Survivor style. We do not hold our peer review panels with the mindset going in that what we're doing is voting somebody off the island. Like, that is not at all our goal. But the peer review panel is less skill-based and more of like what would be called emotional data. And I think that's kind of a cool way to phrase it up, because our 60-day peer review panel is essentially pulling together a variety of different people, somewhere between 5 and 7 people who have been involved in this person's training as they've entered into the company. And not only is this their direct manager and the person who's directly involved in their training and somebody in HR who's had some good interactions with them, we want to make sure that their leadership contact is there as well, because leadership is ultimately responsible for the people who are in their department and ensuring that everything is going well on that front. But we look at peers. We look at people who are side by side with them, and that can be within the department or outside of their department. And we also look at if perhaps it's a manager level employee, they're the people who are reporting up to that person, because there's value in their input for sure about how they're fitting in. And this is definitely in response to our core values. So we hold our core values in very high regard here. They are close to our hearts. And if you've caught any of our lives before, I'm sure you've heard us talk about our core values almost to the point of talking to them to death or whatever. But this is definitely like, how is this person a fit when we think about them upholding our core values? What are we seeing? Are we seeing that they uphold them in ways that are like tangible, that their actions meet what we expect with our core values? The way we do our interview process, we do try and throw some core value questions in there that will help give us an idea of that. And by 60 days in, we firmly believe that like we're able to have a picture. What we saw in their interview process, what we heard from them in response to how they would fit with our core values, is that still standing true? And so this is a really interesting opportunity. I think overall it's served us very well. There's obviously times when this is a hard conversation because, sometimes things are not like 100% perfect. And it's not that we're looking for 100% perfection, but what we are looking at is like, what's really great? What are those areas that we want to see continued growth in? And when we provide that feedback to the employee, we want to see them take action on it. And so that 60-day peer point is been very, very effective for us to this point.
Yes, and just kind of speaking more to that peer panel, I like that aspect of it just because it gives the actual person who's being reviewed is not present. So and it's not a terrible thing, because what you get is people in the room or people just that are meeting to discuss the peer panel, and they feel like they can be more open and honest. Whereas if the person sitting across from you from the table, there may be some things you would want to say as a peer, but you might hold that information because I don't know if this is the right place and time to bring this up. Yeah, so as I've actually liked the peer review because it does allow for people to speak openly, and again, when we bring that person in and we're interviewing them and we're asking them core value questions, you know, what is the answer going to be to every core value question that you ask? More than likely, that person is going to formulate an answer of what they are hoping you want to hear. But then once you have an opportunity to work with them, 60 days in, you get to really kind of see, all right, are they really kind of operate the same way that they answer? So it is a great process, and I like it. And the feedback that comes out of those peer reviews that gets returned back to the employee, I think everybody has accepted those and worked on some of the feedback to kind of get better also.
Yeah. And I think it's always, I mean, I orientation, so I like orientation, so I'm actually one who explains this process to our hires. And I explain our performance review process essentially like I'm doing here today. I don't keep it a secret. I don't pretend like this meeting doesn't happen and we just hold it. I want our employees to know that this takes place. It's not a secret. And their true like behaviors do show within the first 60 days. But I don't want it to seem like a surprise. And honestly, I mean, I've had some new hires shocked or they're like, I don't want to say worried, but essentially, and it's kind of worrisome to think that what people are doing is sitting around and talking about me. And this is like a, hey, we're sitting around talking about you to like trash talk, right? Like this is actually like a constructive and effective conversation. We do have like points I guide people on that are key topics. But I think that you mentioned something important about like the opportunity for people to speak that might be uncomfortable otherwise. Our goal here is to build a company that has a lot of trust within it. And for sure, I think that we're moving in the right direction with that. And I think that we have that established, but it's hard. It's still hard that if something was like not quite right, if something got rubbed the wrong way, there's a few things that are like, man, that just my stomach. And I just don't really know, if this really anything or nothing, but like this is where my gut is sitting in response to this core value question. I think that if somebody were sitting in the room and I had to be right there with them, I think people would withhold more. And then what we're looking for is like that, for a shout out to builders if you're watching that plain unvarnished truth about how someone is fitting in with our core values. I think another piece of it that I have heard that's great feedback is we're taking a lot of people who have never participated in employee review outside of their own and pulling them into the process as well. And we've gotten great feedback on that because it's like, hey, if I'm a trainer, if I'm a person like their partner, if I'm their mentor, because what they do is reach out to me all the time and I'm kind of like that father figure or the senior figure in the department, and I'm handling a lot of their questions. Doesn't my impact matter too? And previously it may have felt that it didn't matter. But with them being involved in this peer process, we're giving them a voice and a say. So I think that it's been really empowering for a lot of our employees to have the opportunity to participate in that. The other thing so far that we haven't covered, so obviously that was the 60-day point, and that's definitely relevant for hires. The last piece of the hire review period is our 90-day. And at 90 days, we're saying that essentially, like, for the most part, training is done, right? Your training period is over, 90 days are out. And when hires come into the company, their one goal, their rock for that 90-day period is to learn the ins and outs of their position, to get really good at whatever skills it takes to be effective in their roles. And then after that, it's kind of like, so what's next? What do we do? And then 90-day kicks off essentially the formal review period that is ongoing for every single employee. And we do have a specific process that we use in terms of like format. I will say that this is stuff that we keep in mind. Like does this need to update? Is this effective? So just because days is what we're doing, I will never say that forever. This will be the only format that we follow. But certainly part of our review process for 90 days and every quarterly going forward is essentially a review of our core values. We will work our values here, and that means that from every level of the company, people need to know what our values are. And what we're not looking for is people can like spit out the rote definition of it just for the sake of being able to define it. But what we're looking for is like, what does this mean? And put it in your own words. And who are you seeing display that? Like, how have you displayed it? And what people outside of yourself within this company are you seeing display? Humbly confident or admitted or certain, whatever it may be. We do also take time to review key responsibilities because, as I mentioned before, like sometimes there can be scope creep with your position of how long you're in a role, you may take on extra, and you may still be defined technically as a field services tech, which is who our installers, formal guards are. But they might find that they're taking on more maybe senior level or a different tier or whatever that looks like. And so it is that moment to say, like, these are listed as the 5 main responsibilities of your position. These are your key responsibilities. Are you actually doing these things? Are you able to do these things? Do you find that you have the time to complete these things successfully? Do you understand that this is what it is, or are there other things that are taking up your time? So we really think that that's an important piece of it. And if something can change, we want to make sure that their position reflects that appropriately. On rocks a little bit, maybe not because I see ashes with you, so you might have been some technical difficulties. But we need to follow the traction model here at Whisper. And so our goals are called rocks. And everybody in the company is setting rocks and working towards completion. And if I'm being like really transparently, I think that we have gotten better about this in the last year and a half. This really push to really follow traction firmly. I think some people did it better than others, but company-wide, we're really pushing forward is that everybody has rocks. They're in smart format, and they are encouraged and actively working for them in a real-time format. This is really exciting in my eyes because I think, I mentioned earlier that everybody wants to grow in some way, shape, or form. And if we're only looking at goals annually, that's really not that often. But since we follow tracks here, there's this 90-day review process looking at rocks. How did I do the rocks I set for myself last time? So that's the follow-up piece. And also, what am I setting for myself this 90 days? It really puts like the onus on the employee to take action and part of that process. There is, in my opinion, a last like weeks to our review process. We call it stop continue. I think about a year ago, myself and Kylie went to hey, is this in? Oh, it is. Dario, take over. My sound.
Yep, sure thing. So looks like we're having a bit of some audio issues there. So yeah, just to kind of continue on what Amanda was talking about. I don't know if a lot of her audio or if any of her audio was clear, but our process has been really around just our core values. It's kind of the structure that we move to when talking about employee reviews. So we started out initially, we were kind of bringing people in and evaluating them on their actual like skill set. And while evaluating someone on their skill sets is great, what we really wanted to focus on was because skills can be taught. You can teach anyone skills, but it's those core values that a person must have that's really going to benefit your company. So we moved our employee review process and we took it more so from a skill set point of view, and we started focusing on the actual core values. So when we bring them in on that 60-day peer panel review, and this is where your peers would be able to offer up any opinions and give examples of working alongside you, and if you did show some of those core values, or if they felt like there's maybe something here that just wasn't quite right, we was able to then take that information, hand it back to the employee along with some feedback. And so far that's actually been working out very well. And I think we made that change about a year ago, is what Amanda was talking about. So just kind of refocusing how we did our employee reviews. Actually, some of the feedback that we've received, sitting through them myself, the many different varieties of employee reviews that we've had over the course of 14 years, is I've seen a lot of those take shape and the transitions that we made, and it seems to be working out well for our company. So as far as any other companies, employee reviews are also great. I've worked at organizations before where there was not really no such thing as an employee review, especially I'm going to kind of date myself here. I'm not going to say the exact place where I
Don't
worked
give
at,
them a
but
year.
yeah, but there was no employee review. I mean, you would come in one day and you would receive just a little notice from your manager that, hey, you got a 50-cent raise and you've been doing excellent work. And come to find out that, maybe the management staff met and spoke about you, didn't really ask you any questions yourself. You just was awarded a 50-cent raise and a pat on the back. Hey, keep up the good work. But you were never really, the company did not care to hear your side of it or address any issues that you may have from, the employee standpoint. So I do think employee reviews are great, allows both the company and the employee to kind of go through and evaluate each other, right? Because that's what an employee company relationship is. If you're going to be there for the long haul, the employee needs to feel like they can give input, and they also need to ensure that the company is listening to the employee, and then the employee needs to make sure that they're listening to the company too, and make sure it's a perfect fit for both parties. So looks like we do have Amanda back. Audio sounds great, so we should be good to go.
Sorry about
Uh,
that.
all
And
right.
here's the deal. I just kept rambling on. I apparently could not read the fact that my audio is garbled. So sorry, folks.
No, we're all good now. Everything sounds actually crystal clear, so we should be good. One other question that came through while you were explaining the previous processes, it was, are there any general tips or things to remember about employee reviews?
Yeah, I think something you actually just said is a really big one. This, at least the path that we're seeing effective here, and some of the maybe like articles and research around it, is this is a conversation. Let your employees do a lot of the talking. This should be less about you telling them and more so about you including them into that conversation and having them bring their perspective as well. I think with that being said, the very next follow-up to that is for sure about not being afraid to push back. If your employee does not set a rock that seems, one, like it's effective, or two, like it's maybe aggressive enough, or like, goal-oriented enough, feel free to push back on that. I don't say necessarily as like mandate, but when you think that they're not giving you all, or maybe they're withholding information, they just haven't said as much of what it is, like, help them know that it's safe to talk about the things that they find relevant to their job. Help them set goals and know that you're going to be there to support and help provide that kind of path for them. So push back. Don't be afraid to do so if it isn't quite enough for you. I think a huge thing to be mindful of is that employee meetings are not like disciplinary coaching type meetings. You want to make sure that those things are kept very separate for a couple of reasons. I think first is coaching in that, like coaching up in for a type of like improvement because you're noticing some deficiencies, is best done in the moment. You don't save that for the end of the quarter or the end of the 6 months and then bring it up, because that's not real time. And frankly, it doesn't feel right in my eyes to not bring that up to somebody in a more speedy way. Also, it can really damper or put a damper on maybe like what that perspective is about employee meetings. You were just talking about like you had a job previously where they didn't hold them at all. Well, the fact of somebody's holding them and what they feel like is every single time it's negative. All I do is get like information about like it's not good enough, or I'm not doing this well enough, or whatever that case may be. You can really have that tone be reflected for life for somebody about what employee meeting or employee reviews are supposed to be about. You have something on that?
Yeah, and it's just kind of speaking more to your point, to where usually there are no meetings, and from the employee standpoint, what do they typically always say is, as soon as your supervisor or your boss says, "Hey, I need you to stop in my office. We need to have a quick meeting," right? From that employee, it's always that sinking feeling like, holy crap, you know what I'm saying? This
Yeah.
can't be good, right?
They start
Because
kind of like tracing back, like what could have happened that I'm having to meet. Like if you don't have that relationship already established, absolutely.
yep. So if you're not holding like the positive and the pat on the back meetings for your employees to tell them, hey, great job. We've noticed this. We've noticed that. You're doing an excellent job and can, keep it up. If you're not having those meetings, if the only style of meetings that you're having is the disciplinary or the, hey, let me tell you where you're kind of not
Messing up.
caring. Yes. Then anytime you tell an employee, hey, we need to have a meeting, the first thing that they're going to think is, this cannot be good. So I want to have a good balance to keep them on their toes, right? When I say we're getting ready to have a meeting, yes, it could be good. It could be bad.
You're ridiculous.
So we did have another question that came through as well. It says, what happens if we're going through that process and we hold our meeting and we just come to the conclusion that the person is not a good fit with Whisper's core values?
So I don't, I guess that question, if you're holding that meeting with the employee and the employee's like, you know what, it's not really working for me here. Well, then we follow that path appropriately with HR. Our goal is not to be like, no, I promise you want to stay here, right? Like we do look at if there's an opportunity, if this role isn't right, is there another role? Or is it that you're simply feeling like you're not a fit for the company? It's okay if somebody's not a fit for Whisper. That says nothing about them as a person in terms of like, oh, shame on you for not being right for us. And actually, I really value people who have the ability to say like, this isn't just jiving for me. I don't like the way this feels or whatever it is, whether it's with the company or their role. And hopefully what we can do is help them transition gracefully and as easily as possible. So, yeah.
Yeah, so definitely that. And looks like right now we are just running a little bit over here on time. I don't see that there's been any other questions that's popped through here. So yeah, as far as employee reviews, we're going to go ahead and put a wrap on today's show. Again, this is Whisper Business Talk with Dario and Amanda. We do apologize for the audio issues we had earlier in the show. We got those squared away. So we will always look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode of Whisper Business Talk. And you can feel free to, again, send us any questions we may have not answered for you. Feel free to email us, get on the phone, call us, send us text. There's multiple different ways that you can reach out to us here. And
don't text me, bro.
Yeah, don't text me either. All right. So yeah, but we will definitely look forward to seeing you guys at the next episode of Whisper Business Talk. As always, I'm Dario Mackins and my host, Amanda Gress. Thank you for tuning in.